A reading from the Gospel of John, chapter 13, verses 21 to 35. After saying this, Jesus was troubled in spirit and declared, "Very truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." The disciples looked at one another, uncertain of whom he was speaking. One of his disciples, the one whom Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. Simon Peter therefore motioned to him to ask Jesus of whom he was speaking. So while reclining next to Jesus, he asked him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus answered, "It is the one whom I give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish." So when he had dipped the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas, son of Simon Iscariot. After he received the piece of bread, Satan entered into him. Jesus said to him, "Do quickly what you are going to do." Now no one at the table knew why he said this to him. Some thought that because Judas had the common purse, Jesus was telling him, "Buy what you need for the festival," or that he should give something to the poor. So after receiving the piece of bread, he immediately went out, and it was night. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you should also love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." A reading from Psalm 26, verses 1 to 3. Vindicate me, O Lord, for I have walked in my integrity, and I have trusted in the Lord without wavering. Prove me, O Lord, and try me. Test my heart and mind, for your steadfast love is before my eyes, and I walk in faithfulness to you. I speak to you in the name of God, who is eternally creating, redeeming, and sanctifying. Amen. Tonight's service begins the Triadem. 3 times when we gather as Christians during Holy Week to recall the Passion, Crucifixion, Death, Burial, and Resurrection of Jesus as portrayed in the canonical Gospels. It is an intentional time for us to place ourselves in the mood and tenor of this riveting story. And indeed, it can be a powerful time for us to engage in this narrative. And even though we have heard the story many times and are even aware of the outcome, if we listen carefully, we may pick up something in the story that is new to us. Traditionally, the liturgy for Maunday Thursday centers upon the ritual of foot washing, imitating Jesus' act of washing the feet of the disciples, as well as celebrating the Eucharist, an active memory of Jesus and the meal he shared with his disciples. Finally, the service ends in silence with the stripping of the altar and sanctuary as a precursor to the solemnity of Good Friday. We pick up the story in the Gospel of John after Jesus has washed the feet of his disciples during their meal and left them with his advice about loving, being humble and just. He tells them to love others as he has loved them, and to be aware that servants are not greater than their master, nor are messengers greater than the one who sent them. It is a reference to his own perception of himself, that he is indeed not greater than God, rather he is God's servant and messenger. This is also a warning to them that they are not greater than God, they are servants and messengers, and if they understand this correctly, they will be blessed. They will reap the benefits of knowing what their task is and how to act while carrying out their task. If they act humbly, lovingly, and justly, it will deepen their lives spiritually. They hopefully will not overstep their boundaries by thinking more highly of themselves and their positions. It is God's reign they serve in, not theirs. It is God's message they proclaim, not theirs. It is God's supper they celebrate, not their own. They are to be conduits of the love of God in the world among those who are looking for meaning in their lives. Another example of this theme of servanthood comes from St. Paul's letter to the early Christian followers in Philippi, chapter 2, verses 5 to 8, where Paul exhorts the community to have the same mind that was in Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not regard equality with God as something to be exploited, but emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, being born in human likeness, and being found in human form, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. As Jesus, in the reading from John, acknowledges his betrayer and betrayal, he speaks of his glorification, the fulfillment of his life's purpose to help others see the presence of God in their daily lives, and how God's reign impacted their lives in deep and transforming ways. Jesus' life has been glorified by God and has glorified God. Jesus tells the disciples that they will not go where he was going, but his parting words centered upon showing their love to others. We learn from Jesus that being rooted in the presence of God is what kept him grounded and steadfast in the last days of his life, where he could not envision living any other way. If living the way he did meant that he might die in order to push the reign of God and the love it brought to fruition, he was willing to take the chance that he might die. Because for him, service to God led to sacrificing his life for the love of others. And so tonight, we may not wash feet, but we will recall the symbolism of service to which it points. We will also break bread together, and will recall that this also symbolizes love and equality, where all receive a share of God's abundance.